Hello and welcome to All Stats Aren't We, a podcast in which Leeds fans cast their combined eye over goings on at Ellen Road, giving scrutiny to the underlying statistics and tactical footings at work at Leeds United. I'm Adam Elliott, Dan James, going for an aerial duel of the podcast, unable to scale Mount Danburn. And I'm joined today by the Lucas Perry, hoofed balls of the podcast. They were into the right areas, but just like this man, they were largely poor. It's Martin Riley. Martin, I didn't write that intro, but how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I wrote my own intro, and I feel it's quite accurate. I'm doing all right. Obviously, lots of things have happened recently since what we're actually going to talk about, but outside of Leeds, I'm doing all right. I've been on holiday to Mallorca. I'm not sure if that was mentioned last week or not while I was away. But yeah, had a nice time soaking up some sun, and the kids were really enjoying the pool. I didn't enjoy it as much as the kids did, but that's what the holiday was mainly for, from the all-inclusive type resorts. So they pretty much spent nearly every day in the pool, and I spent a couple of those days in the pool with them as well, to be fair, and tipping them off lilos and all that sort of stuff, and it was fun, but only so much an adult can sit in a pool. So I eventually gave up. Also, I didn't want to get really badly sunburned, because last year I did. Anyway, how are you?
Well, at least one Leeds fan, has had some fun recently. That's a good thing. I'm well as could be, considering the last few days, and considering as someone who works in football, this is the busiest time of year. My God, I wrote more pieces on Monday than I've ever written in my entire life as a writer so far. It was just manic from minute one. Sorry, Sunday wasn't much better. Saturday wasn't much better. I worked the whole weekend as well. Just a good time to get the articles out and the page views in. So we took advantage of it. But yeah, otherwise all right. I am feeling quite tired, and I'm not off still until we're recording this on Tuesday. I'm not off till Thursday, but one more day and then I can have a breather. And I'm very much going to. But yeah, otherwise all right. So thanks for asking, and I'm glad you had a good time on holiday. You don't strike me as a man that would like to go in the pool. You're not a very pool man.
No, I enjoy it a little bit. Just mainly
Are you a book man by the pool?
Yes, I was a book man
that's
by
what
the pool.
thought.
Yeah. I did. I had my headphones on and listened to the pool and reading for the other few days. But yeah, had some nice meals when we went outside of the resort. That was good too. Had a nice pizza from one of the areas. Yeah, very Spanish food pizza. Yeah, but yeah, it was a good time, and I'm glad to be back in England though, and looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, me too. And speaking of food, just quickly before I move on, because some of our listeners hate it, but some of them would get really annoyed if I didn't ask. So, what did you actually eat tonight?
I just had a burger, just basic double cheeseburger that I just made from the freezer. Nothing special. I wasn't really too hungry for tea, so I just had a burger, which was all right. It filled a hole. How about you?
I had curry, not a takeaway, a homemade one. So
nice,
very, very good. Yeah, very much enjoyed that. What I didn't enjoy was, as we've alluded to, deadline day. And even though I got a lot of clicks and page views, thank you to any Leeds fans listening that did click. You probably did if you were reading any of the stories going out. You definitely will have seen some of mine. But yeah, we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to save that till Thursday, because we have a squad audit post-window. We did a pre-window one, and we did kind of a middle of the window one as well. We only signed two players, I think, since that middle of the window one. So that goes to show the end of our window and what that was like. But yeah, we're going to talk about that on Thursday. I think there's going to be at least 3 of us, possibly even 4 of us on that day. Someone might not bother in the end, we'll see. But yeah, there'll be quite a few cooks, and hopefully the broth is not spoilt. Is that going on the main feed, or is that going on the Patreon only?
It's going on the main feed, I believe.
Okay,
I think we do put the squad audit out for everyone, yeah.
So everyone will get to see that. Speaking of seeing, we are on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. We're doing this year. If you are listening and you'd prefer to watch us, go watch us on YouTube. Go drop us a like. Definitely subscribe. Even if you don't like YouTube, please subscribe. You don't understand how much it's going to help us in the long run eventually. So please just go and do that, even if you're never ever going to watch us on here. So yeah, other than that, news-wise, Martin, we have not recorded a podcast for actually quite some time now, because Hosty and I did the Newcastle preview straight after the Arsenal review, and that was like start of last week before we played Sheffield Wednesday. So First of all, Sheffield Wednesday. Let's talk about that very quickly. There's been a lot of head loss from this, and kind of rightly so in some ways when you actually see the 11 in terms of the players, the level they played at, the caliber of player, the pedigree they've got.
Yeah.
Of course, you're thinking that's a team good enough. Even with Harrison at left back, it should be more than good enough to get the job done against a team. I think the average age of Sheffield Wednesday was 21. They only had 2 players over the age of 20 as well. So a really, really young side. And we probably should have got it done. We didn't, but did we learn anything from that, in your opinion?
No, I don't think it's a game that you can really take anything from either in a good way or a bad way. There were some performances which were all right. Harrison looked serviceable at left back, but again, with the level of opposition, you can't really learn anything from that. And in regards to us actually not getting the job done and not going through, it's just one of those aberrations which happens to Leeds and other football clubs, to be honest, Grimsby Town.
Well done, Grimsby.
Yep. So that it just happens, and it seems to happen to Leeds more often than not. At least once a season, we do generally have one of those games in the cup against a lower league side. Histon springs to mind, plenty of others. But yeah, there's nothing we can learn from it. If a disjointed side, plenty of players who weren't used to playing alongside each other. I'm not really making excuses, but this is just what happens sometimes and in the cup games. And I do think there may have been some complacency at play in the game. That's probably the only negative I may say, because they were looked at the Sheffield Wednesday side when it came out. I thought, wow, there's a lot of these guys who were making their senior appearance, like the first proper footballing appearance for Sheffield Wednesday, sometimes for totally for any senior club. So they will have been looking at it and thinking, yeah, we should be able to get this job done in half gear. And obviously, credit to Sheffield Wednesday side who was put out. They did a really good job and stopped us from creating anything really in the first half. And second half, we should really have won the game. Very, very unlucky goal to concede. Really weird goal. Just got that cross. It was definitely a cross, not a shot. Then this dribbled through Darlow's hands. Yeah, that's going well for Darlow. Darlow stands who said that we should have kept him instead of bringing in Perry. But yeah, we should have won it. We had a lot of late chances, and just to DCL alone, he could have scored 2 towards the end, maybe 3. He had damn many big chances. He just wasn't sharp. First game for us. He's not played a proper game of football for about 6 months, something like that.
I think it's longer. I don't think he's played more than 15 minutes since February.
Yeah,
in a game.
Exactly, yeah. So he's just not sharp. I'm not too concerned about anything that we saw in that game. So nothing we can learn. Just write it off as another Leeds cup loss.
Yeah, I do want to talk about one player quickly, and I'm kind of skipping ahead to Newcastle here a little bit. We'll talk about him later. But one of the obvious performers that played well against Newcastle was Sean Longstaff. Now, again, it's not really an excuse, but the reason that Sean Longstaff, I feel, was signed, and you feel the same, was probably more for the games against Newcastle, when you are the underdog team and you have to dig in, you have to be scrappy, than the Sheffield Wednesday game when you have to essentially be the protagonists of the game with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked, let's be real, he did just genuinely look quite poor. It was a lot of sideways passes. It wasn't very good on the eye. It's just not the kind of game. There is a bit of a concern for me with that if we do get relegated, that we have a Sean Longstaff who's probably not that well suited to the Championship, to be real, but you might need to get the right profiles around him for that. I don't want to talk about that because that's obviously quite negative. But yeah, I just didn't like him in this game, and it really stood out. Whereas other players, I quite liked Harrison at left back when we had a lot of the ball because he got to attack more and he was pretty good there. A few players were really lively off the bench. Nonto and Bogle in particular, you could tell were, you talk about sharp and Calvert-Lewin not being sharp, you can tell they've been playing regularly recently because they just looked at it straight away.
Yep.
When they both came on. I don't know why Farker moved Nonto as well, by the way, when he was playing really well down the right with Bogle. That was a bit weird, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Am I that bothered about going out in the Cup? No, a Cup run would be nice at some point in my life. If not winning it, Palace won the FA Cup last season, so I don't see why Leeds couldn't at some stage in my lifetime. But one less thing to think about fixtures-wise. It's not the end of the absolute world. And, this squad has quite a few injury-prone players in it anyway. So no cup games until January. And, lots of less league fixtures as well, with 8 less games this season in the Premier League versus the Championship. So all in all, that's the way I want to look at it more. As much as it would be nice to play certain players, I don't think you can learn too much from the game. But yeah, I do agree that we should be beating a Sheffield Wednesday team of kids. I don't see why we wouldn't have enough, and we probably did do enough in the second half really to win it if Calvert-Lewin was just a little bit sharper. Although I was very pleased, as everyone else said, that he got into the right areas, and it's not just been that game as well, the Newcastle game after, which we'll talk about soon. Also, yeah, just another quick shout out about. I think some people watching on YouTube will realise that some of us are deciding to wear Leeds Clobber and some aren't. I'm now at the point where I've worn most of the shirts because I'm on these pods a lot. So I'm running out of options. So I've actually used this one before and I'm using it again now. But I plan to. I don't know if anyone's seen. I absolutely love that new range they've brought out of Leeds gear. And it came out, funnily enough, today, the day after deadline day, which is just really bad timing because none of the fans were that excited for it, considering the events of yesterday. But I'm going to buy some. So to anyone watching on YouTube, expect to see at least myself and Hosty and Toldo, wherever on, in better gear, because I know all of us are all eyeing some stuff up for sure. Anyway, I think that's enough of that. So we're going to get into the Newcastle game. This probably won't be a super long pod, although I've said that before and it ended up being a lot longer than it was meant to, but hopefully not today. We'll start, as always, with the game summary, which goes as Leeds approached the game in a 4-3-3 shape, with Newcastle opting for a change to their usual tactic and instead going for a 3-4-3 shape. The possession was split pretty evenly between the two sides during the first half, with both sides having spells where they were able to get their foot on the ball and get into the opposition half. However, most of the chances came from either transition attacks or high turnovers. Shock. Despite Leeds having more shots, it was Newcastle who looked more likely to score. Leeds, however, were rescued halfway into the half when Gabby Goodmanson blocked a shot, looking destined for the back of the net from very close range. The second half was very much even in terms of chance creation. However, Newcastle this time were able to dominate the ball for longer spells. But despite this dominance in possession, they weren't able to create any chances of note, and the game ended 0-0 in what was, at the time, and this is really funny in your notes, you said it was the lowest XG of the Premier League season so far, and it said that on Sky, and you are correct. But Liverpool against Arsenal the day after did break it, which was really funny.
Actually? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that.
By, if my maths is correct for there, about 0.14. Yeah, it is. So, second lowest of the season. And on telly, like the other game was on the Sunday. So, really good work, Sky. You are picking the right games. Absolutely. But yeah, just to go over the XG numbers for the Newcastle against Leeds games, we actually did win the XG battle. Woo! 0.69 to their 0.46. They're slightly more of the ball, 57%. 43. We only had one shot on target though, which was that Calvert-Lewin chance at the end, which did actually go down as a big chance, which I felt was maybe a little bit strong, but I haven't actually looked up the exact XG numbers on that. But yeah, that was the one. Anyway, as was said before, this was the second lowest XG of the season so far, and it could be a while that it's broken, you put on the notes. Well, it might be a while before Liverpool against Arsenal's broken, but yes, certainly this was bad. But yeah, there wasn't much action at all, Martin, which is probably why this pod's not going to be particularly long today. But what can we actually learn from this that's either a positive or a negative?
Well, obviously, the negative side of things is that we didn't create a whole lot of chances. This 0.69 is very low. I think maybe in the full season last year, maybe we had one game where we created less than 0.69 XG. I can't remember which game it was, but I think we did for one game potentially. So yeah, we didn't really create a whole lot. However, it is a strong side who we're up against, although they did have some injuries, mainly in the attacking and midfield areas. I do think that their defence was still very, very good, very strong. They had three big guys at the back in Byrne, Botman, and Shah, who are all excellent box defenders. I particularly liked Shah and Botman in that respect. They were very good at defending the box. As soon as anyone would come close to the box, they'd be closed down, not giving them space. And the midfielders, although that maybe not the most progressive of a pair, they are also pretty strong defensively, both Guimaraes and Tonali. But yeah, it's the positive though is limiting a side like Newcastle to so little. We created, even though it was a very low scoring game overall, we still let them create less than we did. There were some moments that weren't caught by XG, where I think the expected threat would have been very high, where chances didn't really get off. Some for Newcastle, also some for us as well, to be fair. But I do think we can take away that we were able to do a pretty good job against one of the bigger sides in the league, and that we were able to compete physically with a side like Newcastle, and that's something I did think we did extremely well. And I think that was one of the reasons why we were able to limit them, because we were able to win those duels. Second balls especially was really, really strong in this one. And yeah, so there's a bit of positive, bit of negative in this one for me.
Yeah, I'll start with negative, which is chance creation, open play. So far, all season, including the first two games, really not there at the moment, which is partly why I think quite a few people are disappointed with our end to the window, but I won't get into that. Against Everton, there were a couple of moments. Pirro had one against Newcastle that was the Calvert-Lewin one. I'm not seeing a huge chance being generated by Leeds from open play, from some genuine guile or creativity from an individual player or from the system itself getting someone into a good area. So that's a bit of a worry. Now, that's caveated by the fact that we've played Newcastle and Arsenal, who are in the Champions League, for a reason. But then that's also caveated by the fact that Newcastle had, even though a couple of players managed to pull through Tonali and Cher in this game, they were missing some big players. And I'm not just on about the new strikers they've signed, the two new strikers they've signed in recent days, and Isak when he was still in the building at that point. I'm on about, Gordon. I'm on about, Barnes and Elanga being on the bench because they weren't deemed fit enough or whatever it was. There was, I'm probably forgetting Joe Linton, for example. There were so many. So this is not Newcastle at full strength. So it's a good time to play them, I think. I think if they had been, it might not have quite looked like that. I know there are people that are a little bit down on Eddie Howe's ability to generate chances that aren't from transition or set pieces, which is predominantly what he does. But I still think they would have had a bit more of the game if they'd had a few extra of their better players there. So that is a bit of a negative. But the positives are obvious. The positives are Daniel Farke did learn. Some people did criticise last week, Hosty and I, when we were at the Arsenal review a little bit, because we were either a bit negative or we were a bit critical of Farke. Probably that goes playing it down a bit. It was a bit more than that, to be fair. It was a lot stronger than that. But we did say hopefully he learned some kind of lessons in terms of just profiles in the right places in the team, and in the end he did. And you talked about winning the first and second balls. It was probably more the second balls, to be fair.
Yeah.
But even Mecha just having, and Yaya Toure has discussed this in detail, and Carl Anker of The Athletic, shout out to him, he's discussed this in detail with Yaya Toure, of the importance of having an arse. And the reason I mention this, it's a really funny article. If you can read it, go read it. Basically, there's quite a few players that are really good at just poking their bum out when they've got someone up their backside. And then they either can win the ball, or they can win a foul, or they just make it a little bit more difficult for the player that's trying to win the ball that they're contesting with. And Lucas Mecha was consistently shoving his arse into Sven Botman, and because of that, was either making the contact difficult for Botman to win, or he was able to win it himself, or the ball just went loose, and then it was a Longstaff, or it was a Stack, or it was a Nonto, or it was a James would be able to pick up the pieces from there. And that was really good to see. And there are a few players that are really good at this that aren't even big. He's big, so he obviously helped by that. He's physical. Raheem Sterling and Eden Hazard are two of the better players at doing this as well. They're just really good. Nonto's probably got the build for it as well. Those are the kind of players that can actually take the ball with a guy up their arse, and they can just get out of it because they can use that. It's a weapon. It's like you get bumped out the way almost when you go up to them. So I really enjoyed Mecha in this game for that. Yeah, we're getting into some player stuff here. I probably shouldn't be going this far, but anyway, I'll quickly just finish this point. Some of his game was frustrating because I think there were a few poor technical moments. He's not as good a passer as Pirro, but the point is, it doesn't matter if he's not as good as passer or as good as finisher. The fact is, he's going to win the first contact or the second contact on a number of occasions, or he's going to help the midfield to win those second balls. And we were against Tonali and Guimaraes, and I know there was no Joelinton, but those two are so good at like being aggressive in those areas and winning 50-50s. And yet we were winning, like we had Longstaff there almost proving a point against his former team and was able to win a lot of those. And like Stack, I don't think has been perfect in possession in every game, but out of possession, he's been really solid actually for us in every single one of the 3 games in terms of his physicality and winning duels. So really, really impressed with the fact that Farke picked those players. And we said this against Arsenal. I genuinely think that game would have gone a bit more differently had we been able to go direct and pick up the pieces with second balls. But here we are. He's at least done it, and hopefully we can do it again. Hopefully it's something that is repeatable going forward. It's just I want to generate a little bit more in terms of chances. And that's my next question for you, Martin. What was the plan of the game to try and create chances in the end then? And why do we feel it didn't work?
So I think one of the big plans was to get high turnovers. I think that was definitely one of the plans, to try to create space in their third. There was a definite plan, especially in the first half, to try to win these high turnovers and get players quickly into action and getting quickly there. The old Jesse Marsh approach. It is definitely a valid way of creating chances for your side and getting penetration into the opposition third by getting these turnovers, and that was very effective. There's a reason why Sean Longstaff won Man of the Match in this, and that's because of how good he was at doing that. We've all seen the big challenge that he did on, was it Guimaraes who he put that big one on? Yeah, that was nice. We've all seen that, but there's plenty of other moments as well where he just nipped in before it. Stark was also very good at this as well. It was the second balls where he was getting these, so not technically a high turnover, but it's similar sort of actions where you're trying to generate these situations where there's more space for you to attack with pace. And that's another thing which we tried to use was Dan James's pace. There was noticed a lot of times we were trying to nip balls into the right channel for James to try to run onto. Wasn't always effective. I don't think James is quite at, and I don't want to say he's not at his best, but I don't think his pace is as much of an asset in this league as it was in the Championship. I know, shocking news, right? Shocking news. But yeah, I think that was one of the other ways that we were trying to create chances. And then just in general, we were using the left flank quite well, and transitions as well. There was one good moment from, I think, a Newcastle corner where Nonto and Gruev combined nicely on the right side, and then the pass was just a little bit overhit by Nonto. It was very close, so the Mitch was nearly onto it. A couple of inches further and he would have got a shot off from it. That was one of those nearly moments that I spoke about earlier. But I think those were the main tactics that we were looking to employ. I don't think we felt that we could really get them from sustained open play, which I think is generally a fair tactic against any of the bigger sides in this league, because most of the sides around the bottom end where we're going to be, let's face it, won't have the technical players to be able to break down a strong defensive unit like Newcastle. So it makes sense to try to use transitions and high turnovers to try to get into those areas with more frequency.
Yeah, and set pieces, but we didn't really make as much of them. And to be fair, I don't think Newcastle may be the best team to win lots of corners against. One of the better teams there earlier in the entirety of the league. I was actually talking about Dan James just before we came on with Hosty, and not to call him out because, well, I think he's going to tweet it anyway. So if you see the tweet, it'll be him. And if you don't see the tweet, he was planning to do this. And what he was planning to say is it's really interesting, isn't it, that you've got a fan base where, and I'm not a Dan James hater these days. Well, I say these days. I was never a massive hater, but I wasn't a lover of him, let's put it that way. But I quite like him now. I wouldn't say I love him, but I quite like him now. But we have a fan base that really love him, and that's fair to say. And yet, we also have a fan base that are all crying out for, oh, we needed a new right winger, we needed a new creative player, and Hosty was making this point of like, it doesn't really make much sense, does it? Everyone wants Dan James to play, and now suddenly, oh no, actually, changed our minds. We really need a right winger. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, creativity wise, transitional moments, high turnovers, of course, set pieces, of course, and we need to make most of those moments. The worry I have, and I think we'll talk about this on Thursday as well, is when teams do go ahead against us, like what does that actually look like? I think Newcastle would have made it horrible for us to try and fight our way back into the game. Other teams might continue to attack, like a Man City, probably not going to stop playing the same way, so that might be okay. I say that when it's Man City, but you know what I mean. That's a concern I have for the season, which is really mad, isn't it? That you go from 95 goals in the Championship to, I think we're probably going to be a bottom 3 team for goals scored this season. That doesn't mean we can't stay up, by the way. I'm just saying I think we'll probably be in the bottom 3 somewhere for goals scored. We might be, 9th for goals conceded or something, and that might be what does it. I don't know. We'll see how it all unfolds, but I just wouldn't be surprised if we don't score that many. So yeah, and one of the players that and I'm going to skip ahead with players again. One of the players I was happy to see getting on the ball, and we were getting him into situations to be on the ball, whether that was winning the second ball from Metcha, battling with Botman, or whether that was just having nice little triangles, was down the left side to Nanto. He was like frustrating, but also quite comfortably the most dangerous player on the pitch for us in the first half in particular. He was the one actually trying to make stuff happen. And he's one of the ones that you feel like can be a bit of a moments player, can be a bit of a differential, can open a game up like that because he has that ball striking off both feet from range. And he's probably one of our most creative players in the squad now that we have not signed a creative player in the window. He was really good here. And I would like to see Farke as a next step, give him a little bit longer, because I understand why he gets taken off. They have data on running, and he never seems to finish more than like 70 minutes tops. But I would really like to see him play a bit more in some games, because it feels like he's growing and growing and growing, and it might just be that the next action he has ends up in a goal, or an assist. So yeah, that's one thing I would say. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about chance creation, but Newcastle maybe not the best example because they'd still had a back 5 here, and they still had a lot of their main defensive pieces of the team, other than maybe Joe Linton, and even then, like, they had good players on the bench. They wrote Hall off the bench. They didn't even bring up on their shiny new expensive centre back Malik Chow. Yeah, they're absolutely stacked for good defensive options and good transitional defensive options as well. So maybe not fair to judge yet. And obviously our next 2 games, Martin, are Fulham and Wolves, which is going to be a bigger tester for us. I think if we can come through those with at least 3 points, but hopefully more, hopefully 4 or 6, then that would be very good. And hopefully we see a bit more open play chance creation in those. But yeah, in this game then, was our game plan similar to the Arsenal game? We've already touched on this in terms of profiles, but in terms of the actual game plan itself, in terms of the usage of the ball, Martin, was it more effective and why?
It definitely was a similar game plan, in my opinion, to what we looked to do against Arsenal. And the reason why it was more effective, you've already touched on it quite heavily, and that is Lucas Mecha. He was just superb. He wasn't always winning the duels, but that's not what it's about. It's about being aggressive with the centre-back that you're against, putting them off, making sure their headers don't land in the right place where they want to go. And then, because that's been disrupted, our players can win the second ball from the defender's header. So that is what you're looking for in your centre forward. And Perot is not that guy. He doesn't ever jump for an aerial. I don't think actually in this one, Mecha didn't jump for too many aerials because that wasn't what he was wanting to do. He was more trying to put off centre back who was going for it.
Stick his arse in.
Yeah, exactly like you said. And yeah, it's a really a very good way of doing it. It really is. I loved it. And just the way that the ball, he was able to get the ball to stick in their third more often because just of that. There wasn't really anything else different in the way what we was trying to approach this game. Obviously, Newcastle's side isn't as strong as what Arsenal's was. Arsenal's squad is just ridiculously stacked now that they've spent so much money in this window. It's unreal. But even so, this is still a very strong Newcastle side, and we were able to make the ball stick in the final third more often than we were against Arsenal. And that was the main reason for me, was just the profile of the striker. And even if Mitch not going to be clinical himself, getting on loads of chances, I would 100% prefer him on the pitch, especially against these sides, the top sides in the league, over Perot. Potentially, if we're facing a side who's going to let us have more of the ball, then yeah, maybe Perot could be a better choice for that game. We've got to use our our strikers in the right way against the right teams. And against the top 6 side, you don't want to see Joel Pro against the centre backs because they're most likely going to have very big guys who are just going to bully him all game. So you want someone who's going to rough them up a bit and be a bit of a, don't want to say a bastard, yeah, be a bit of one of those. But yeah, that was the main difference for me.
Yeah, I'm not going to address lots of like feedback we get and stuff, but we did have someone in the comments of one of these on YouTube saying that Pirot has never got bullied in his life, and he was talking about it in the Championship and in the first game of the Premier League against Everton. This was before Arsenal, and I just remember reading it, and I didn't want to clown on this guy or anything, but I fundamentally don't agree with that at all. Pirot does not challenge for stuff. He doesn't, like, the thing with Metro, I can't remember who said it in our group chat is, but the thing with him is, like, he will leave a bit on someone as well. If the ball, Botman wins it cleanly because Metro's late, he'll probably foul him. He'll probably go and stick a bit of an elbow into him, or just clatter him a little bit. Something like that. Pirot's never doing that. And I think this conversation about how you judge strikers is just really interesting to me, because in the Championship, we got away with Pirot as a 9. I don't think he's a number 9, because we were a dominant team. We had a lot of the ball, and it was fine. We didn't have to worry about second balls as much and the ball coming back at us too much. It was kind of okay, and it was a lower level as well. The teams aren't as sharp and as clever and all of that, so that's part of it too. In the Premier League, I'm not saying that Pirot doesn't have some ability that can translate, because I think he does. But you need a certain type, and we've got Metcha and we've got Calvert-Lewin, and both of them are exactly what a team in the bottom half need. You might even argue teams higher up than that, but certainly in the bottom half, you absolutely fundamentally need that. You need someone who can win those, can be a bit dirty, be a bit aggressive. It's just so crucial. And even though, there was quite a lot of similarity to Arsenal in terms of how we were using the ball, it just gave us the option if we wanted to, with their quite intense high press when they wanted to do it, to just go long. And we'll just see what Metcha does with it. And I really, really enjoyed his performance, even though he was a little bit scruffier with if Pirot does get the chance to turn, he's probably going to play a slightly more secure pass, probably a nicer pass than Metcha is. But the problem is he ever going to get the chance to be secure in possession against Premier League centre-backs? I'm just not sure he is. I don't think he did in either of the first 2 games. And really, from now on, for the rest of the season, it should be a case that Metcha and Calvert-Lewin share pretty much all of the minutes as number 9s for the rest of the season. If Pirot has to come on there as a sub, that's fine, or even a bit deeper in a slightly withdrawn role behind one of them, that's fine. But he shouldn't be playing up front on his own from the start in a Premier League match for the rest of the season, unless both players are injured. And even then, you could argue Okafor should be above him in the pecking order, but we can save that for another day. I guess the question then is, why was the game so boring, Martin? Because it wasn't just us that weren't able to generate chances, it was also our opposition. And shall we give a bit of praise to Strauch and Rodham here? Because I think they've done quite well. In my honestly opinion, I think both of them are holding their own. We've got BL, who we all think as a podcast team, that we're absolutely sure is a Premier League level centre-back and is definitely our best centre-back in terms of box defending. I'm really happy with how Pirot and Strauch have done, despite the fact that they've had moments against Arsenal that weren't particularly great. They were good here, and we limited Newcastle, and they play well. And I know it was against Asula, not their main striker, but still, that was pleasing for me. But was there something else that was able to kind of limit Newcastle?
It was just mainly the out of possession approach. They did struggle to build up, especially during the first half. That's why the possession was quite even in the first half, was because they weren't able to get the ball forward from the back to front as often as what I think they like. I know they're not a big build-up side compared to some of the bigger sides in the league. They're much more direct in what they do, and they do like the transitions too. But I do feel that we did outside of some moments, we did a reasonably good job of defending against some of these transitions which they were trying to attack. And even with players missing, they did still have plenty of quality on the pitch. Osula, who we've just said isn't their starting centre back, has just been sold for 30 million to Stuttgart.
I think that fell through.
Did it fall through?
That fell through. Yeah, I think so.
I didn't
I'll
realise
check while you're talking, but I think it did.
Fair. But either way, that was the reported figure for him. So he's still a player who's worth that much. And then you've got Murphy, and who was the other winger who they had? I can't remember the other.
They had Ramsey, didn't they?
Ramsey, yeah.
He's playing a really interesting role, I felt.
Yeah.
He was like left wing, but he was often quite central.
Yeah,
he was quite a free player.
Yeah, I think he was more of an attacking midfielder who roams a bit.
Probably.
That's probably more the way I saw it as too. I think Murphy was definitely wider a lot more, so he was operating more as a winger. But even then, when Livramento went further forward, he was dropping inside, and was doing a good job of managing these players. And the few moments where Strauch was just really dominant in some duels, and I think things you got to shout out to the defensive players. I think the guy who had the toughest job on his hands was probably Jayden Bogle. Livramento did make his life a terror for a few moments, but he did also eventually manage the situation. I think he grew better into the game defensively as it went on. But there were
England's two best right backs.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, but yeah, it was a very very good game for a lot of our defensive players, and I even felt that Ilya Gruev had a decent game in this one.
Yeah.
He was doing a good job of picking up positions and catching players who were making runs. There was one moment where I think Livramento dropped a little bit deeper, but then the ball was quickly played on to Murphy, and Gruev went with his run. He didn't manage to stop the cross from going in, but he was still tracking the run and doing the right sort of things. So I do think that you can give our players plenty of credit. And the shape was opting, it wasn't as aggressive in moments as we usually like, and we were dropping into a mid block quite often.
Definitely.
A 4-1-4-1 mid block, and no, on paper it's 4-3-3, but oftentimes this shape will look 4-1-4-1, where you had Gruev in between the two blocks of four. So I think you've got to give credit to the players and also to the setup itself as to why we were able to limit them. But I also feel that Newcastle were a bit shit. If I'm totally honest, I was expecting more from them, and especially in the second half when they brought on two big players in Barnes and Elanga, and they did nothing. Like, I was terrified of Harvey Barnes coming on because, well, for obvious reasons.
He entered the Jayden Bogle penitentiary, didn't he?
He did, like our friend said would happen. And Elanga also didn't do a whole lot. A few threatening moments, but he didn't create anything, didn't have any decent shots on target. And I think in the second half, Newcastle barely had any XG at all. They had more than us in the first half, if I recall correctly. And then in the second half, they're probably still more than us, but not by much. It was a really small amount. So for a club who were in the Champions League, we did a really good job of stopping them. But they also maybe didn't help themselves. Maybe some players weren't sharp enough. Maybe that was why Elanga and Barnes weren't that great off the bench, because maybe they weren't really fit to play. But who knows? But yeah, we've got to give credit to our defenders in this one.
You know, just back to XG for a second and talking about ours earlier. You said there was one game last season that you think we had less than 0.69, and you were correct. I checked it. Do you remember what game?
No, I said I couldn't remember which one. But was it a Burnley game?
It was the Burnley game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it just clicked for me there straight away, yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, 0.4 that day.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So this has been fun. No, it's fine. And you realise when you're in the Premier League that you have to change your outlook and your how you're viewing this team. We're a very, very different team to the one that won the league last season. And you recruit differently for those things, right? You recruit for more technical players for a promotion push. You recruit for more physical players for a relegation battle. Every single one of our signings is 5'11" or taller. And I think in terms of the game plan, play the big lads. It's working. Even if you play roughly the same way, it still works. Like you say, it was definitely way more of a mid block, 100%. Against Everton, you had moments where James and Nonto in particular were jumping right on their fullbacks, probably because they knew they weren't fullbacks against Everton. But here, there wasn't really much of that with the wing backs. We were much more of a solid shape, and I really did like that. But the only thing I will say is, again, just to repeat about Newcastle, I was just working out while you were talking. I think there's probably 6 of their best 11 that were either on the bench or not involved in the squad at all. So they only actually had 5 of them that I think are probably their best starters right now. So they're a long way off what we'll see when we go to St James's Park, I think.
No excuse. We were also without players. No excuse.
Yeah, I'm putting Tanaka
no excuse. No excuse for them. We're a newly promoted side. They should be beating us. They should be beating us. Come on.
I agree, and I think it wasn't just the Barnes thing. When I saw Ramsey named, I thought, it's going to be a debut goal for him, isn't it? It's going to be something, or he's going to make something happen, because he's quite a fun player, Ramsey. Quite a fun profile. I was quite scared of him, but we marshalled him quite well, even though he had quite a free role, like you say. Don't think anyone wasn't particularly getting a handle of him at most of the time. The one thing I will say is, and John's been banging on about this, and he won't mind me saying that, but he's right, and it was evident in pre-season, it's been evident in these first games here as well, is there is just sometimes an absolute chasm of space that teams are not making more of. Arsenal obviously did, well, in a way they did, but like Newcastle didn't. There were moments where they had, if they'd had a little bit more quality with their next pass, you'd have had a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4 or something like that, and they weren't quite getting it right. And that worries me a bit, because I do think teams might work that out and might start either playing over us or just quickly playing a couple of passes around us quite easily. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but in general, the shape was pretty good. Players were in good spaces. It's just there's like a bit of a spacing issue in between the centre-backs and the midfield. And it was evident, even if people are listening and thinking, that'll be fixed by Ampadu back in, because he's quite good at marshalling and protecting that space. He is better, but he was even doing it in pre-season quite a lot, where there were just the 4 in front of him in the 4-1-4-1 and the 4 behind him, and he was doing like so much space for just him to defend 10 yards in front and 10 yards behind. That can't happen. Teams will make more of that.
I think it was the first half where most of that what you're talking about was.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Yeah. And I think second half we dropped back a bit and we weren't committing as many bodies forward. I think a lot of the times where there was this space is when we were getting forward. So it was generally in transitions when there was quickly attacking, because they're very good at those quick attacks. And I think that's where the sort of space was, the moments that I was talking about where the Fermento dropped a bit deeper and then Murphy pushed forward and Groove covered. Those sort of moments were where there was space to attack, and they didn't make the best moment. We did a decent enough job of defending against those, but also they could have done better, a lot better.
Yeah, we are having, I think, partly to make up for it, we're having to deal with having essentially quite good recovery defenders in terms of their speed. Like Bogle and Goodmanson are really good at getting back into position. Gruev, like you said, and Ampadu's the same. They're quite good in positional sense. They might not always be the most physical players in the world. I mean, Ampadu's pretty physical, but they're not the most physically robust defensive midfielders in the league. Not completely anyway, but they're quite good at having a bit of a nose for danger in those areas and getting back into spaces. So that's good. But it's just that there's times when I'm worried about a pass. But yeah, it was more in the first half for sure in this game. I just wanted to point that out for listeners because it's something to look out for. There's definitely I would call it a cavern at times, a cavern of space between midfield and centre backs, other than the defensive midfielder, and it's something to look out for. Anyway, and also the obvious of if we do push on with our fullbacks, we do leave some space there as well. But I think we have to do that sometimes, so that makes sense. Anyway, in general, though, is this a repeatable game plan for the other big sides? I think this is going to be a quick answer. Do you think it could work?
I think it'll be the game plan we'll do against all the other big sides. It won't always work, but I think it's the only real game plan we can have, because we're not going to dominate the ball against them. So we just need to try to do these kind of things, getting high turnovers, winning the second balls. Those are going to be the things that we're going to have to try to do against big sides for me, definitely.
Yep, I don't want to add anything to that because I completely agree. I do think it can work, let's put it that way.
Sorry to interrupt, just a quick one. If you're enjoying the video, be sure to like and subscribe to help us keep the content coming. And if you want even more, you can support us over on patreon.com/ASAW Patreon. You'll get bonus podcasts, exclusive articles, and access to our Discord community, all while helping us make more of the content you love. Thanks. Now let's get back to it.
Right, now let's move on to the second half of the analysis where we'll discuss specific players and performances in a bit more detail as well. We had a question from a good friend of the pod, all stats, aren't we? Discord Jester Alfie, who said the reported formation for us yesterday was 4-1-4-1. Did the team manage to hold the formation against Newcastle, or did they revert to Daniel Farke's usual 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3? And does it show that Farke is finally open to being a bit more flexible? What do you think about this at one, Martin?
First of all, I think the difference between a 4-1-4-1 and a 4-3-3 is there is no difference.
Not really.
It's the same formation. It's just when you're in your defensive shape, the wingers go narrow, a little bit further back receded, so it's a block of 4. So there's not really any different. It's just in this game it was more pronounced because, especially in the second half, we weren't having as much of the ball, so we were having to see that block of 4 in the middle more often. But yeah, we've already seen some flexibility from Farke in terms of the shape. So we've seen a change from his tried and tested 4-2-3-1, which I think started every single game in the Championship last season. I don't think we varied that formation a single time. So, I would say that it is showing that Farke is open to being more flexible, especially in terms of the shape. But that is really the bare minimum of flexibility that a manager can show and should show to be a bit more solid. And that this was what I was expecting him to do. It's what he did last time with Norwich as well. He shifted from a 4-2-3 in the Championship to a 4-3-3. So it was the exact change that I was expecting to make, was a 4-3-3. And we've seen some little bits more flexibility. Obviously, profiles, he's not immediately gone for pro again in this one. He learned his lesson from the Arsenal game, we hope. But we'll see if that lesson gets bedded in, or if Pro comes off the bench in the next game and scores a goal and he starts him in the game after that.
Didn't even come off the bench in this one, did he?
No, he didn't.
That was crazy. I thought he would do that at least, even if it was as a second striker, more kind of role. But I guess he didn't want to lose that solidity in the middle of the pitch. Maybe he would against a Brentford or a Wolves or a Fulham, because those are games you probably need to go for a bit more if it's 0-0. So it does make sense. I think it was still a credible point for sure. The one thing I want to add to what you said is only one small thing, is I think that Stack is a really intelligent footballer, and I think he's had a couple of moments, as I said earlier, about kind of his. I think his technicals are good, by the way. It's just that there's been a few sloppy passes for sure. He's been hitting them a bit too high at times, like towards the players' like shins or ankles rather than actually at their foot, which is a little bit like, you just need to sharpen up on that, mate, please. And I know he can. We've seen him in the first game. He was completely dominant in every single phase of that game in terms of every single aspect of it. But yeah, he was a little bit sloppy here in that sense. But what I will say is he's just an incredible player, like off the ball. And this wasn't just like defensively. This was some of his runs were either to like sniff out a second ball to go and get on the end of, or he was actually trying to like get towards Metro or Calvert-Lewin later in the game. So he would not, it wasn't like a front two per se, but he was just trying to get closer to them in case something dropped around the box that he might be able to latch onto the end of. So it wasn't a 4-2-3-1, but he was definitely the one midfielder out of the pair that was getting forward the most that I noticed. And I noticed it even more on rewatch. There were just certain moments. It didn't always come to him, but I was just pleased to see him attacking towards the box. And I do think, even though he's not got like a crazy career record for goals, I think that he might get a few this season by doing that. By box crashing or getting towards the box. Like if it's from range or it's just inside the box, he'll get a couple like that. So that's good to see. So yeah, Longstaff wasn't doing that so much. He did it a couple times, but it wasn't really it wasn't his game as the other 8. It was clearly like, we want Stack to get towards the striker as much as possible. Let's talk about another one of our signings now, which is we've only seen Jacobiel once, Martin. That was against Sheffield Wednesday in a game where he had to play in a high line. Not really his kind of game. He was still, I think, fine, and there was pretty much way too much unfair criticism of him. But we did have a question from Gio Wade, which was, will BL ever get into the team now? I made my stance pretty clear at the start here. I think he is the best centre-back at the club, and I think he will prove it in time. That isn't to have a slight on Strauch, who this pod team are big fans of, and Rodon, who, again, this pod team are big fans of. I really like both those players. I think they're both good in different ways, for different reasons, as in, Rodon's a bit more athletic and strikes a bit better on the ball. But Biol is the better player overall. He's the better box defender. If you think that Rodon's a good box defender from what we saw in the Championship, which I agree with, it's just levels in this league and at this level. He's done it not just in Serie A with Udinese. He's done it for his national team, and they're not a crazy, good team in European football. So a lot of their games, they're the underdog team. He's very, very good. He was good against England. He is genuinely very, very good at sniffing out danger. The words that I had described to me were he is a bit of a warrior of a centre back, and I can't but agree with that. And so I am confident in time that he will get back in. But obviously, Farke has. I think he broke a record with this clean sheet, man. I wrote the piece today, and it was like he's the quickest manager in Leeds United history to the amount of clean sheets that he's got. He beat Arthur Fairclough, he beat Bielsa. So fair play to him for that. But yeah, he will still change this. We've got one less clean sheet, I think, than Leicester and Southampton, in the same amount as Ipswich for the whole of last season already, which is magnificent, for who we've played. But this is kind of what we expected of this Leeds team this season. So Biol, for me, is going to be a fundamental piece of that in the long run because he is so good at defending the box.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I do think that with time he will solidify himself into the side, but we know that Farke takes a while to warm up to new players, and it's happened with multiple different players in the past.
Yeah.
Tanaka,
yeah.
he's one of his favourite players now. Whenever he speaks,
100%.
Whenever he speaks about Tanaka, you can see he's got a smile on his face because he loves him. He loves him now. Yep. But when he first came in, he wasn't sold on him and he didn't start him immediately. So I think we're just going to have to be a bit patient with Biel getting in there. And this is something which we did mention to our friend over the summer, that we thought that this might happen because Farke takes a while to warm up to new players and that he may not immediately put Biel in, even though he should be starting, because he is, like you said, our best box defender. I watched him a fair bit. I didn't do the article on him, it was Dan who did the article on him, but I watched a fair bit of him from Dan's article, watched the footage that was taken from that and a bunch of other stuff, and he's definitely our best box defender. He's doing the sort of things which Rodon and Strout were doing last season in the Championship in Serie A and in international football. It's not the same levels at all, and I do think that with time he will prove it. We're just going to have to be patient.
Yeah, totally agree. When we say box defenders, I might be confused by that term. I think you can be a good defender in terms of like intercepting the ball, reading the game outside the box, inside the box, wherever on the pitch you are. But box defender, to me, it talks about the fundamentals of heading the ball out, just getting it away. It talks about having a bit of a nose for danger when it's where the ball's going to drop, and you just get your body on the line, you get your body in front of it, you just boot the ball out. He is old-fashioned and old school in that sense, and I think he's better at it than Strout and Rodon, who I think are holding their own more than enough. But I thought Strout played really well here. I know he had that weird moment where he tried to head it back to Perry.
That was a mix-up with him and Perry. I don't think the communication is quite there between them as yet. Still learning each other.
I think he got a late shout and he kind of ducked out of it when he wasn't going to, and then it was just a bit confused. So I don't fully blame him for it, but that was a weird moment. Then we had, there was one pass, he just passed it in our half straight to one of their players. Didn't like that. But all in all, I think the way that people judge performances of any player comes down to the moments that they have in the game, and sometimes it can come down to that. Like if you had two really good moments and you contribute to 2 goals, that's enough to have had a good performance, even if you're pretty stinky the rest of the game as an attacking player. But I think people struggle to, a couple of moments like that are a bit hairy, we'll call it. They can't see past it and go, actually, no, Strout was really good today. There was one other moment, actually, that Alanga bumped him off the ball when he was slightly off balance. It wasn't even that bad. Alanga didn't go anywhere, but it was just like, that wasn't great. He just out-muscled Strout for a second there. But other than that, he's pretty flawless. And I'm not just saying that as this pod team all likes him. He was really good. And Rodon was similarly, there wasn't really much wrong. Both pretty strong. Strout probably the slightly better of the pair on the ball. So Biel will struggle to get in while they're playing like this, in my opinion, but he shouldn't for too long. How much of Perry's poor distribution is down to him then? We had a question about this. And how much down to the lack of targets? Even Metchell looked small compared to Dan Burns right behind him. Dan Burns? That's a nice name. It's Dan Bird. But yeah, I don't know who asked that. But yeah, someone asked that. So answer that one for me, Martin.
So I do think that even though some of the passes from Perry were astray, especially the ones which were going towards the wide players, because we're sometimes was looking to get to wide players. I don't think it wasn't as bad as what I remembered it being on the rewatch. There were still some which went astray, but there also were still some really good ones in there. There was one which he clipped to the left wing and it literally landed on Nonto's feet. And it was just a perfectly placed long ball. So there were some good ones in amongst them, and the balls that he was putting up to Mature were also really good, because it wasn't wanting to win the duel. He's just wanting to get it in that general area so Mature can challenge for it, and then we win the second ball. So I do think there is definitely a game plan of doing that. And even when the balls would go into the wingers and the winger was being bullied like Dan James was for when it went over to the right side, even then, on some of those moments, we did win the second ball. So it's not always a bad thing when you're trying to hit these wide players and they're being dominated by the fullbacks who they're up against, because the second ball is what we're looking for, not the initial challenge win of it. So although I'm not 100% sold on Perry's distribution yet, it wasn't as bad as what I was expecting it to be, and he had some really nice long throws in this one. So I'm kind of letting him off his kicking, because his throws are really top. And I think that could be a really good weapon in transition when he gets used to our players. And there were a couple of them which was a little bit overthrown, like one towards Nonto where it's a transition moment and he was just thrown a little bit too far. But once he gets used to the players and how quick they can get onto balls and where he should be putting them, I think his distribution could improve. It's just learning the squads that he's got. It's still very early days, and being a goalkeeper is a totally different sport to outfield. It's not said enough.
Yeah, I just want to repeat what Farker said post-match in case anyone didn't see it. He said, Lucas came with an injury. 2 clean sheets are always good. We know he can improve his kicking. We don't want him acting like a number 10 or an additional outfield player, but there is room for improvement. He needs time with the goalkeeper coach. The main thing is saving the ball. So far, so good. And I don't want to add anything to your answer because I think that's perfect from Farker. Completely agree. It's like a tiny bit of constructive criticism, but mostly it's praise. He's doing his job as a goalkeeper. And utter woke nonsense is goalkeepers using the ball as an extra man as an outfield player. Isn't that right, Martin? No, I'm joking. There are plenty of examples of that working very well. Tom Wilson, who might be listening, would love me to shout out Hull City and Hamburg coach, whose name is currently escaping me, Tim Walter, and how he used his goalkeeper in build-up, and it is important. But we aren't that team, and we don't need to be that team. It is absolutely fine. The question we had from Rob, well, it wasn't really a question, it was just a statement. He just said chance creation, chance creation, chance creation. I don't know what that really means, Rob.
We've already covered it. We've covered it anyway.
We have.
Yeah.
I don't really know what that means, Rob. Are you saying you want that, or are you saying it's a question? I don't know, but we have discussed it, and we hope that you had a lovely time hearing our answers.
I just want to say hi, Rob. You've been really nice in Discord recently. Love you.
Oh, he's one of the best. No offense to anyone else in there that I've not named there, but we absolutely love Rob. He's just great value. I mean, the Hall of Fame channel is literally just Rob, so pretty much.
This time I'm praising him for level-headed takes, so.
Ah, right, okay, yes. But he is worried about chance creation. And there's a question he put in before deadline day as well, so we will discuss that on Thursday in a bit more detail as well. And Jamie asked a similar one, which we'll answer on the next pod, which is, seeing as the transfer window, this pod will be after the transfer window shuts, either the players we've helped will solve our problems with creating chances, or how do we solve our problems with chance creation with the current squad? And that second part we will obviously answer in a lot of detail on the second pod. So we really hope that you all listen. That's why I wanted to plug that just for a second. Man of the match then, I think the obvious answer, and the one that Sky gave, and the one that most other fans, I think the fans did vote him on Twitter that I saw, and I think the Newcastle fans probably thought it as well, and they were clapping him very much, and they're very happy that he's enjoying himself here, although they were very much ruffled by, I saw it was great, after the match, I don't know if you saw Martin, he did an interview, and he said, Newcastle fans are great, Leeds fans are just as good, if not better, and I saw so many of them rattled, and it was fantastic. And actually, to be honest, if any Newcastle fans are deciding to listen to this, I probably think we are two best sets of fans in the country in terms of how vocal we are anyway. There are reasons I don't like Leeds fans, but there are plenty of reasons I do like Leeds fans, and one of them is just how much of an atmosphere we are able to create. And it was great, and apparently people that went said Newcastle fans were singing along to Gary Speed songs and generally just making it fun as a day out. So hats off to them. I'm not criticising you, but I just love that from Sean Longstaff, and he was my man of the match. Was he yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anyone who I'd say who did as good a job as him. Was the perfect game for Sean Longstaff. Physical battle against another physical side, one who he knows very well. He knows the players in that squad in and out, so I'm sure that will have gave him a bit of an edge in that respect. But yeah, he was superb. His work rate, his anticipation as to where the second balls were going to drop, his timing of challenges, just... I've asked him to do a single thing better out of possession, if I'm totally honest. And even
almost like he knew his teammates, his old teammates.
Exactly.
A little bit. That's part of it. It has to be.
Yeah. But yeah, and even in possession, he wasn't awful. He didn't do anything progressive by any means, but was just tidy when he had the ball. Didn't turn over the ball when he had it. So you can't ask for more from him. And this is what I thought he would bring, and why I was happy to bring him in. A lot of people were very, Sean Longstaff, meh. That was the genuine reaction by a lot of Leeds fans when we signed him. And no, he's never going to be a progressive midfielder. He's never going to be someone who does sexy stuff with the ball, but he will be damn aggressive off the ball, and he will leave it all on the pitch. And if Leeds fans don't love him after that performance, because when we know how much Leeds fans value out of possession stuff, why don't you love him? But yeah, it's a fantastic game from Sean. Loved it.
I think a lot were taken to him in this one because it was night and day between us and Sheffield Wednesday, for sure. Even his ball carrying was pretty decent when he had the moments to break forward, like with that. And yeah, like I said this on a pod way back now when we signed him, but for someone who's built quite lankily, he's strong. He's physically very strong, and he's very hard to knock off the ball against a couple of midfielders that are very strong themselves as well, although he's not quite Joe Linton, so I'm glad he wasn't there. But yeah, no, really impressive. So I would say against his boy club, he was man of the match, and I think everyone agreed. Is there anyone we felt struggled here? I want to go first with just one, which is, I think we touched on it earlier, but like Dan James has not played well in any of the games. I think he was probably the worst player against Everton. Not that he was terrible in that game, but because he had a couple of moments, but he's not been great. And he's been really quite bad against Arsenal, and then not much better here against Newcastle. I don't think his combination plays as good as some of the other players that we have, and I think that's hindering us. His pace, as you say, is not helping us as much as you'd like it to. It still will be useful in moments, but it's just... he should really be a squad player in my eyes, which is why I'm disappointed we didn't sign another player that can play out wide. That's more of a playmaker. I think that would have made sense, but here we are. So yeah, I think he pretty much struggled here, but honestly, I thought most of the players were at least solid, if not quite good. So he's the only one I was like, and like Metcha, like his passing was poor. It was. I'm not going to defend it. It was, but like, so what? He at least got the ball at the pitch. So a lot of people I can praise more than I can criticise. What about you?
Pretty much exactly the same. Yeah, the only player I would say struggled a bit was James. There were a couple of moments where Bogle struggled against Livramento, but Livramento's a very, very quality player.
He's probably one of the best 10 fullbacks, 5 fullbacks on the planet.
It's probably one of the first times I've actually watched him play.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's a great player, so I can understand why he struggles with him. He's just got that really nice, quick turn of pace when he's carrying the ball, and it's a nightmare for fullbacks to defend against. And
after an ACL.
Yeah, exactly. With him being a fullback as well, so he understands what makes life difficult for opposing fullbacks. That's what makes him a great wing back, I think. But yeah, but even despite that, Bogle had a good game. He was combining nicely with the central midfield players. He had some decent moments defensively as well as the couple of poor ones, but. And even James had a couple of decent moments. There's one cross which he made, which was really, really nice, but it was just slightly light away from where it should have been. But overall, yeah, he has struggled so far. This one was probably his best out of the 3 games that we've had, but it's a low bar considering the first 2 performances were pretty poor. And ideally, I would prefer him to be an impact sub. Once Okafor's up to speed and when he's available, I want to see Okafor on the left and I want to see Nonto on the right, because Nonto and Bogle is cash money. We know it is.
And Tanaka, by the way.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Man United pre-season game?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Those three were just running rings around them for about half an hour. It was great.
Yeah, exactly. So there wasn't anyone else who I felt struggled. Just a quick shout out to some of the other players who we haven't talked about. We've already spoke about Mater and what he did well in this one, so I don't want to labour on him anymore. But Gabby Goodmanson,
yeah, I was going to say him.
Some glorious moments from him. That one in the first half where he just carried it inside and just drove forward.
Yeah.
He just, I know it was Trippier who was putting pressure on him, who's not the quickest anymore, but he just left him behind so easily. He's a specimen when it comes with those physical attributes and the way he carries the ball. I absolutely love him. It's a great replacement for Firpo, if I'm totally honest. He offers a lot of good stuff, and he's got the pace and physicality as well, and also the block for the only decent chance which Newcastle really had. That was his positioning there was great, because you saw that it was all pulled over to the left, and initially he was wide, but then obviously he found himself in really central space and got to be just in the right place to block the shot. So massive credit for him both defensively and offensively. So yeah, he was your other one that I wanted to shout out. Anyone else that you want to shout out that we haven't?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Nonto was the most dangerous player on the pitch for us, like easily. Like it didn't always come off, but I don't hate players that try stuff like that. Like some of his shots and some of his passes weren't quite there, but it's just like, yes, we need you to be a creative spark, because you're one of the only players that can do something that people don't expect, and that's both your teammates and the opposition sometimes. I don't particularly care which wing he plays on these days either, because I think he's probably a slightly better player on the left in terms of his profile, but I think he's probably better combining with Bogle on the right in terms of Bogle's profile.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't care, I just play either way. And he was good. Like, I thought Stat off the ball was really good here, but it kind of got overshadowed by Longstaff being a little bit better. But like, it's that let himself down with the ball, but on the ball, off the ball, like, he's doing everything we want him to. I thought he was pretty good against Arsenal, to be honest, apart from the last 10-15 minutes. So, that was good. Goodmanson is growing on me by the game. And we know not just that driving run you mentioned from him, but we know one of the main areas that we're going to be able to get up the pitch with this team is probably him doing that and Bogle doing that. Whichever one of them wants to invert into those spaces and make things happen. Part of the reason why I would like Nonto there as well, because Nonto kind of has a good understanding of when he should be inside and when he should let Bogle on the outside, and vice versa, when he should be outside and let Bogle do his thing on the inside. So I really liked that from him. I thought Bogle had a great game. I actually thought, like, even though Livermont's a tricky customer, as a fullback / wingback, he did really well. And like, I just think he's held his own. Like, he's the one player that doesn't look that different from the Championship completely. There are quite a few others that you're noticing little things about them. Roden and Strout, even though they've been pretty strong, it's a little bit like, oh, well, you can feel it in the Premier League, some of them in moments, but I just don't really feel like I felt that, other than maybe when Arsenal, he got a yellow card, Bogle, when he did that early on. But, like, that was the Arsenal game, whatever. He's done pretty well in the 3 games so far, and obviously was excellent against Sheffield Wednesday in the Cup as well. Took his goal really, really well. So shout out to him. I think he's had a really strong week, to be fair. And as much as we were joking about England right-back conversations, he's probably like 6th or 7th in the pecking order. If there is a few injuries and he has a good season, who knows? He might get in. I'm joking. He probably won't, but I absolutely love him. I think he's a player that will be playing Premier League football in 12 months' time, no matter what. Now, I think he's shown he's a Premier League player, even if it's towards the bottom end. He's certainly good enough to hold his own. So, shout out to him. But yeah, we're all in agreement at All Stats, aren't we, Towers, that Sean Longstaff was the best player on the park here for both teams. So, fair play to him. I think that's everything. Unless there was really one thing you had left to say about anything in the game. Or...
Harrison was all right off the bench. I'll say that. Yeah, I thought he was pretty threatening from that left side. Put in some decent balls, drove really well, and got on the end of some one ball which I didn't think he was going to get on the end of. And yeah, he was effective off the bench, and there could be a player there who could be effective for us potentially. I'm not sure whether I would want to start him, but if other players weren't available, maybe I'd rather start him over Dan James. I just think he's got a touch more technicality than James has. He's got similar levels of out-of-possession work rate. You cannot question his work rate and his defensive side of a winger's game. And I think his deliveries are a little bit better than what James's are as well. So, and also we know he can score from distance. I know we've seen that James can as well, but I think maybe it's just sentimentality from the player that he used to be. It's creeping him in a little bit to me, but I didn't mind him when he came off the bench in this one. But
yeah, I mean, his best goal for Leeds was probably against Newcastle as well, Jack Harrison. So maybe that's part of your
screamer with that one, screamer.
Probably his second best one was against them in a different game. To be honest, he scored 2 absolute beauties against Newcastle. Yeah. Actually, I just want to quickly touch on that just for a second. Obviously, we know he didn't get sold, so he's here and he's going to be sticking around. And I'm sure there's lots of fans that are really frustrated by that fact. And obviously, the time at Everton that he had recently was really poor. I'm not disputing that. But he's a left winger. He's not a right winger, first of all. I'm the only right winger around here, am I right? No. And yeah, the main thing is that, we didn't bring in a left-footed set-piece taker. We looked at Harry Wilson. We looked at Facundo Buonanotte, both left-footed, both free-kick and corner takers. Would have been really nice to have. We didn't. The other 2 options that we have right now are Ilya Gruev, no thanks, and Gabriel Gudmundsson, slightly less no thanks, but I feel like Harrison probably is the best left-footed taker we have at the club. That's not to say that I want him on every single corner for the rest of the season, but if he comes off the bench, it's not a high bar. It really isn't, but he probably is one of our best corner takers. And I know there's fans listening like, he can't take them. We've seen them in the past. It's still better than most of our squad. Let's be genuinely serious for a moment. It is. So I don't hate that we've got that option. I think we needed a profile like that and we didn't sign it. So Harrison realistically is the next best one in the squad that we have. And I probably hate him coming on as a sub a lot less than I would Brendan Aronson, who has done absolutely nothing for me at the start of the season in any of the games he's come on in. Sorry, Brendan, if you're listening, but you need to step it up a bit, pal. Anyway, just a quick reminder then, the website for our Patreon is patreon.com/ASAW Patreon. We thank anyone that is a Patreon subscriber. It really is massive. And we do have lots more content. We've done loads over the summer so far for you guys, and we've got more content this season. We've got stuff lined up, hopefully, coming soon, especially during international breaks, although this one is a bit different because we do need to do the post-window State of the Squad pod, which is the next podcast that you'll hear on Thursday. If you are listening on YouTube or watching, hello. Again, don't forget, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm sure you've seen Hosty say it during this video somewhere. It really does help us out a lot. I cannot reiterate that enough. But yeah, that's all that we have time for tonight. We'll be back for that pod on Thursday, as we say, maybe out Friday, maybe Saturday at a push, but probably Friday. We'll discuss the end of the window and our thoughts on what we did or didn't do, let's put it that way, and see how our pre-window predictions were a little bit as well. I'll dig out what we said on that as well, Martin, because I think that'll be interesting. All that we have time for is to say, yeah, we'll be back again after the international break for Fulham. I think we've already got our podcast sorted, so you can all be excited for that. It should be fine, hopefully. We'll record that soon. And yeah, we're back in London again. Woo, there's loads of games like that this season. Yay, we do so well in London. We've got such a good record. Fantastic. But yeah, that's enough from me. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much to Martin.
Thank you as well, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you, dear listeners. Thank you, watchers. Thank you, everyone else in between. We hope that you enjoy your little break from football, even though, Leeds have got 4 points, and that's great. But we'll see you next time for that pod on Thursday, as we say. Bye.